All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome today to a slightly shorter lesson on the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening and their effect on the American Revolution. So, remember that the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening, as far as the things that they taught and the things that they believed, they could not have been more different from each other, but they achieved a common goal. And what that was making the colonists realize that they had a greater authority than the government. In the case of the Enlightenment, that was a European movement that questioned traditional authority and the role and power of government. Many philosophers in England and in France spoke about the rights of people and the role government should have in protecting those rights. Remember that at this time, many people believed in the divine right of kings, the idea that God gave power to the king to rule. So that movement was linked to earlier movements, the Enlightenment being such as the scientific revolution, as it promoted rational thought, opposed superstition, and refuted the idea that kings should rule by a divine right. And in a lot of cases, they said, hey, stop worrying so much about God and worry more about the laws of nature and science. And that's what the Enlightenment promotes. So, with several Enlightenment thinkers, they're leading the movement and going on to impact the views of the founding fathers of the United States and eventually the leaders of the French Revolution in 1789. The most important Enlightenment thinker, even though knowing these individual guys really isn't that important, the main thing you need to know is how they influenced the founding fathers. John Locke is the first one to know. He believed that all people are born with basic natural rights that are inalienable. They can't be taken away from you. These rights are not given to you by the government. They're given to you either by nature or by God, depending on how you view it. And therefore, the government can't take them from you since the government did not give them to you. Life, liberty, and the right to own property are also among John Locke's ideas. Now, when I talk about the Enlightenment, it's important for you to understand I'm telling you what they believed, not what is true, which is that God is personal, God did create you, and that nature exists and works along the lines that God has created it to. So as I'm explaining the Enlightenment here, don't get it confused. I'm not promoting these ideals. I'm just telling you what they believe. Jean Rousseau, he argued that a social contract exists between government and the people. It is an invisible and unwritten contract. You don't actually sign it. Instead, you enter into it naturally upon your birth. You agree to let rulers make decisions to maintain order. However, government needs to protect your natural rights. If the government does not protect your natural rights, you have a right to overthrow or peacefully change your government. Thomas Hobbes believed that man was naturally sinful or naturally self-motivated, maybe should be the way that I describe that, and can be easily corrupted. Therefore, government must have clear rules, procedures, and restrictions to prevent corruption in the government. Thomas Hobbes preferred a monarchy, but believed law and order was crucial for a functioning society. Now, next we've got Montesquieu. So Montesquieu argued that government needed a check and balance system to prevent one person from becoming too powerful. When all power rests in the hands of one person, it can be too easily corrupted and abused. Voltaire believed that people must be able to speak openly about the government and even disagree with it without fear of punishment. Now, again, more important than understanding each of these individual guys, that's more of an AP World thing. In AP US, you need to understand that these ideas influenced the creation of the United States. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence says that all people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, a clear nod to John Locke. Then the U.S. government gets divided into three equal branches of power, right? The judicial, the legislative, and the executive, and that is thanks to Montesquieu. Then you've got the First Amendment to the Constitution, which says that people have the right to freedom of speech, press, and protest. This was an idea from Voltaire. Then the U.S. has a Republican government with regular elections. When I always say Republican, I mean a republic, not like the Republican Party. This is how people choose a new government if they feel that their current one is failing. That's a lot of that is thanks to Rousseau. Now, moving to the other side of the coin, the Great Awakening. Again, this is not the same as the Enlightenment. In fact, they teach very different things. But in both cases, the colonists realize, hey, our ultimate authority is not the government. Our ultimate authority comes from outside of ourselves or is ourselves. But either way, it's not the government. So the Great Awakening was a religious movement that took place in the American colonies. And in many ways, it was in response to the Enlightenment. So traveling ministers argued that colonists had lost religious passion that drove the Puritans to settle in North America. And the Enlightenment encouraged a more secular society with less focus on religion. The Great Awakening was led by a wave of ministers who argued that religion needed to play a larger role in people's lives. These ministers traveled all over the colonies from north to south and preached from the Bible. Very large crowds gathered to hear these sermons. The Great Awakening, if you're looking for a date, by the way, takes place somewhere in the 1730s and 40s. So, a couple of important ministers to know from the Great Awakening. Jonathan Edwards, famous for his 1741 sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. His message to people focused on the errors of mankind, that man was sinful and God was angry over this, and man needed to ask or beg for forgiveness because the day of judgment was coming. Now, George Whitefield, who traveled up and down the coast of the Atlantic coast to give sermons during the Great Awakening. He was actually British, but he came to the Americas. He gave over 350 sermons in 1 year. At one point, he was known for his emotional speeches that often made him tremble, and for which he was very, very loud and animated. The Great Awakening taught that all people were sinners and one could only reach salvation through repentance. This was different from earlier faiths like Puritanism, which believed in predestination. So the Great Awakening was more accepting to believers. Now, religious experience should be in this tradition a little more casual and formal. Worshiping in a tent is as good as being in a church, and this was new. This meant that one could reach salvation without a pope, a priest, or even a king. So the individual, and not any religious government or government authority, was in charge of their relationship with God. So what was the impact of all of this? Well, due to the accepting nature of the movement, new denominations such as Baptists, Methodists, and Congregationalists form. You also get the formation of many colleges like Princeton, Brown, Dartmouth, and King's College, which would eventually become Columbia. Now, many colonists realized that religious power rested in their own hands, not in the hands of the Church of England. So soon, many colonists will link this idea of religious freedom to political freedom. So if the king was not needed to reach salvation, why did we need to have our ultimate authority be the government? And all of this is going to help lead to eventually the American Revolution. We'll talk more about that next time.